it all depends, but as Marco Rubio said, the ball is in Russia's court. So it depends entirely on what the Kremlin is going to come up with. It's almost certainly going to make certain demands, such as Ukraine is not given any weaponry during these 30 days. It's going to make other demands as well, along the lines of no peacekeepers. Then when the peace negotiations start, if they ever do, they will be able to say, well, facts on the ground, there were no peacekeepers during the ceasefire held, and therefore we don't need peacekeepers for the negotiations for the actual bringing of the peace. We will have to see as to what Russia will do, whether it will make demands, whether it makes too many demands, and the Americans rightfully walk away from it. That remains to be seen. Trump wants a deal, and he's been very clear that he wants a deal first in a day, then 120 days. I think it's back to 100 days, but it may have changed as well last week. So he wants a deal, and it's now a question of will he decide that it's not worth having a deal with Russia because Russia has made too many demands, or is he prepared to just accept whatever Russia wants? The fact that the Kremlin has been very clear, one, that this war will continue until 2026, and two, that they don't actually want a ceasefire. They want to have peace negotiations first and then a ceasefire. They don't want to have a Minsk 1 or 2 anymore. They don't want to be led by the nose, as Putin keeps on talking about, that the West betrayed Russia somehow. So that remains to be seen. Both sides remain certainly divided. America has a very different approach to Russia in bringing this war to peace. Now, whether Donald Trump will wash his hands of the situation and give Russia what it wants remains to be seen. We will have to wait and see as to how the Kremlin is going to play this. What we do know is that Steve Witkoff seems to be heading on his way to Moscow, and that Trump has talked about the fact that he and Putin will have a phone conversation in the next few days. Maria Zakharova, the press secretary of the foreign ministry in Russia, has said that yes, the Americans and the Russian delegations will meet. Dmitry Peskov has said there will be a conversation between Trump and Putin. When that will be, we don't know. So this all remains to be seen, and we are at the moment conjecturally just spitballing. So we will have to wait and see as to what happens. So I think in all likelihood, they will try the ceasefire, but they will make demands on it. And it's up to the Americans and less so the Ukrainians, because I suspect Donald Trump will bully them into it. But it's up to the Americans then to make a decision as to whether they continue with the ceasefire or not. Not much has actually changed about Putin's real strategy in Ukraine. It's been quite clear for a long time that Ukrainian neutrality, the only way to get that neutrality is to keep it out of NATO and to change the Ukrainian government, demilitarization, and facts on the ground. What we have seen is that this is a slightly bigger version of what Russia has already demanded. In terms of a demilitarized zone in the south above Crimea. But in fairness, that was something that they were talking about in 2014 with Novorossiya, the new Russia that went from Kharkiv all the way down to Moldova, effectively. The demilitarized zone is slightly new, but ultimately it is Novorossiya in all intents and purposes. And then you have the buffer zone in the east as well, which would encompass Kharkiv and Ukrainian territories that were never taken by Russia. The demilitarized zone would leave Odessa completely open and would also allow Russia, primarily, I suspect, to be able to access the breakaway Republic of Transnistria in Moldova. So it is particularly interesting as to what this FSB-linked think tank has proposed, and also the fact that Dmitry Peskov, Putin's spokesperson, was very quick to say he'd never heard anything about it, which generally means that he's well aware of the situation. But we'll see in terms of what comes next. It's certainly a attempt at long-term control of Ukraine. I mean, it always was going to be Russia's overarching demands. We've seen this with the neutrality. We've seen this with the change of government as well. This is something that Russia has been very focused on, is the need to control Ukraine. Russia, at least on the face of it, is willing to allow other states agency unless they're Ukraine or in the near abroad to Russia, the neighborhood. So it has always been this case, and this is something stronger, I would say, in terms of what they really want to achieve in regards to Ukraine. We don't know whether it is intelligence as such, or where this report actually came from, and who's actually reading it in the Kremlin, if anyone. So it remains to be seen. There certainly are strong suspicions that this is something the Kremlin would want to do. If they are able to get what they want in Ukraine, a pro-Russian regime, it would have to be a friendly regime for the Russians. If they don't get, NATO peacekeepers or European peacekeepers aren't brought in, then that will also make it hard, destabilize Ukraine. Russia will continue its interference in Ukrainian politics and in its economics. If they have the demilitarized zone, they basically control the entire coast of Ukraine. If they have their buffer zone as well, then that also becomes much harder. Ukraine would effectively lose its second city, most likely. So it is certainly worrying, because it would show that the Trump administration really doesn't care about European security. It just wants to go back across the Atlantic and make America great again. China would have very little say. Europe would also have very little say, and would yet again highlight that Europe is also very weak. So Russia would be in a particularly dominant position. Now, whether that means that Russia would want to test NATO, that remains to be seen. If America has shown that it's weak and goes back to across the Atlantic and wipes its hands of Europe, if Europe has shown it's weak, NATO is effectively dead. So this remains to be seen in terms of quite where Russia will go from here. But certainly it becomes far more worrying that Russia may, in the future, decide to test the unity of Europeans. The Kremlin has talked a lot already about giving America access to resources in the newly occupied territories of Russia, what is Ukrainian territories, anyone else. It's also said the same in regards to Russian territory as well. So we know that Trump is mercantilist, and therefore he's trying to build a stronger relationship with Russia because he wants access to its oil and also to the Arctic resources and various other things. So that will certainly worry the Europeans, because the Europeans don't want to see a resurgent Russia. At the same time, Russia will almost certainly try and divide Europe, playing on French sensitivities, perhaps as they did under de Gaulle, that Europe should have a European-focused security, trying to find ways of dividing Europeans as well. They already have in regards to Slovakia and Hungary, so they will try and find ways to undermine that. They will also most likely continue to support Marie Le Pen and the Alternative for Deutschland in Germany and France, and they will certainly play into the idea that Europe is an undemocratic place and it's full of immigrants, which seems to be something that J.D. Vance especially is worried about. It's very sweet of him in America. So that will be something they will try and do. In regards to China, I'm not necessarily certain quite what Russia will do in regards to China, but it will certainly probably make a deal with China that your interests are in Asia, in East Asia. We won't pay any attention to what you're doing in the South China Sea. In fact, that's good. If you want to take Taiwan, fine by us, but leave us alone in Europe and Central Asia. So that may be what they try and do with the Chinese as well.